Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, national political correspondent for the Washington Post, Dave Weigel, will be here to, well, maybe not totally wrap up the midterm elections. We still have a significant amount of results to come in. But at the very least, we can say the Democrats have taken the House with at least 222 members of Congress. That represents 29 flips. There was one on the Republican side. There are still several races not yet called. Meanwhile, Democrats lose in the Senate. 4 Democratic seats flip to Republicans. One Republican seat flips to Democrats. Still waiting on at least 2 off the top of my head. Well, we could easily do that math. Probably closer to 3 we are waiting on. But that will not implicate the control of the Senate. Meanwhile, Democrats gain 7 governorships and flip 6 state houses across the country. Big news there. Big wins and major gains for voting rights in Florida, in Michigan, in Maryland, and Missouri. We're seeing redistricting changes. So voting suppression may have carried the day in a couple of states last night, but institutionally it lost last night. Meanwhile, California says we're okay with that gas tax. And New York finally goes all blue. And down ballot goes fully progressive. Meanwhile, Democrats prepare to issue subpoenas from about more committees than you could probably count on both your hands and feet. Millions to get Medicaid, both via referendum and some changes in state houses. And lastly, the United States Congress now has more women representing Americans ever than at any other time in the history of the country. Additionally, some firsts. We have Native American women congresspeople, Muslim congresspeople, and Democratic Socialist people, and the youngest of all congressional, congresspeople now from New York. All this and more on today's program. Let me just start, there was, going into last night's election, there was obviously people had a tremendous emotional investment I think this is typical human nature, right? You create expectations, you perceive those expectations are going to be met, and then you develop greater expectations, which really is, I think, essential to human to human ambition and to human progress. You don't sit on your laurel. You know, a year ago, if somebody had said, "Oh, the Democrats are going to take back the House," or 2 years ago, some Democrats will take back the House with a 29 vote swing, I think people would have said, "Okay, great, we'll take it. That's fantastic." But of course, what happens is you develop more and more ambitious ambitions, and Beto O'Rourke in Texas, a state that has not elected a Democratic Senate or even a Democrat statewide, I think, in over a quarter century, people thought has a chance. And he did have a chance, but it was an uphill battle. In Florida, highly unlikely that Andrew Gillum would have been the nominee, never mind winning. It would have been nice if Bill Nelson had left the House a little bit during this campaign. Apparently couldn't be bothered. That one, I think, we'll talk to Dave Weigel if he has a sense of that race. But Stacey Abrams, also a long shot. If you had said to me a year and a half ago, the next governor of Georgia will be an African-American woman, I would have been like, oh, you're wrong. And it's not over. She may end up going to a runoff. Andrew Gillum, the numbers are down to like 15,000. Last night, late, we got a report from a voter in Florida who said that the new Florida licenses did not scan from the scanners at the election stations, the voting booths, essentially. And so he anticipates there would have been a lot of provisional ballots. We don't know. Is a lot 50,000 or is it like 3,000? We just don't know. But assuming for the moment that we have not that Andrew Gillum did not win, we still guys like Scott Walker, bye-bye. Chris Kobach, bye-bye. Colorado flips. We saw governors in New Mexico, in Maine, Illinois, Michigan. I mean, contemplate what are the states that Donald Trump won that he shouldn't have won to win the election? Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And if you don't think having a Democratic governor in Wisconsin is not worth 11,000 votes in a presidential election, just in terms of resources, I don't think you know much about politics. With all due respect to whoever you are that I just said that to.
Sell out.
Same in Michigan. 7,000 votes. The resources that come from a governorship. Never mind the fact that what also passed in Michigan was a wholesale election reform in terms of voting. You get, I think, registration by mail. Let me get the list of stuff here. But, I mean, it's big stuff. Really big reforms for Michigan. And this is a state that has practiced a certain amount of voter suppression as well. We could see things improve in Wisconsin in that way. Let me pull this out here. In Maryland, same-day voter registration passes. Could bring about 7% of the voting age population in Maryland onto the rolls, according to research. Missouri and Arkansas raised their minimum wages. I can't find all my list of all the things in Michigan, but we'll get there. But significant. Here it is. Automatic voter registration, same-day registration, post-election audits, no excuse absentee voting. You don't have to justify. In New York, you have to be out of county. straight ticket voting, protections for military and overseas voters. This is big election reform. And we've seen that across the country. In Florida, 1.5 million people are going to get the opportunity to vote. Andrew Gillum is down by 15 or 10,000 votes. And I don't know. I don't know how many of those people, felons, are going to take the opportunity to vote now that they've got it. And I don't know how many of them are going to vote Democratic, but I would be awful shocked at the end of the day if that number didn't constitute a 10 to 15,000 vote swing. So there's a lot of stuff that happened yesterday that was extremely positive. And not the least of which is the Democrats will have the ability to both investigate Donald Trump and what's going on at these agencies. They will have the ability to slow the roll of any type of legislation, obviously. And in these states, you're going to have the ability to have some measure of control over how redistricting happens and having resources going into 2020. So it would have been great if we were talking about Governor Andrew Gillum right now. It would be great if we were talking about Governor Stacey Abrams or Senator Beto Rourke, or frankly, if we were talking about the Democrats controlling the Senate, which I think, fortunately for everyone's emotions, nobody, I think, sort of embraced that in the way that they embraced the possibility of Andrew Gillum and Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke and maybe 2/3 of those three or something to that effect. And the important thing now is that all the new voters who were activated, the tremendous strength exhibited by women in terms of coming out and organizing, that those people who've entered into not just voting, but activism around politics not get discouraged by this. Both because, A, it shouldn't be discouraging, the results. You don't want to go out necessarily and have a party about it, but these results are in no way discouraging. To have lost the House, it is almost unfathomable what a horror show that would have been. Medicare, Social Security, you would have seen cuts definitively, without a doubt. You probably would have seen all of the patient protections in the Affordable Care Act completely gutted. That's just as a starter. I'm sure there would have been other horrors, but those are pretty big ones right there. So we have protected Social Security, we have protected Medicare, and just broadly speaking, we'll also tell you this. We are looking at a much more conservative Republican Party, a much more Trumpista Republican Party, and a more progressive Democratic Party. Those two things are the truth. You lost some of the non-Trumpers, the never-Trumpers. They didn't do much. But maybe you'll hear Mitt Romney come up and say something occasionally.
That wasn't very gracious of the president.
Now, on the Democratic side, for what it's worth, and I'm not sure how much it is worth anything, frankly, but you have a much more progressive caucus, right? Only Joe Manchin at this point is the only conservative left. And so I'm not sure what that's going to mean, frankly, if they will get more obstructionist to the extent that they can. But it is what it is. All right, we're going to take a quick break in a moment. Although, let's just check in on this. This was a pretty stunning night last night. Our good friend Steve Ducey went to a bar in Missouri because he was out trying to get a feel for, the average person. So he goes out to a bar in Missouri, and look at how he connects with the average person. It's really, really touching when he asked this woman, why is she voting for Claire McCaskill?
Like I've said before, my husband, my son's father, Sean Krause, passed away this summer because he didn't have health care.
Yeah.
And he died because he was poor in America, and it happens more often than people would like to believe.
And that was the number one issue for you.
Number one.
When the Democrats, Brett and Martha, were talking about health care, a couple of the people here at the bar, the Patton Alley Bar, that hit home, and that's why they voted for her. Of course, Josh Hawley's people are waiting for the results just about a mile from where we're standing right now. All right, back to you all in New York.
All right, have fun at the pub.
Have fun at the pub.
Wow.
Can you imagine having someone tell you that their husband died because they didn't have enough money to have health insurance because they were poor in America, and you going, so that's your number one issue?
Not the caravan. Fascinating.
But
other people are worried about other things. Let's go back to New York now.
Right. Let's step over here to the folks who seem to be having a little bit more fun. Wonder why that is. You Democrats sure take this to heart, don't you?
Just trying to have a fun show here.
Leave it on the field.
You know what's amazing, too, is that she started it by saying, as I said. So they clearly had asked her beforehand. So is it like Ducey was like in this moment, like, oh, I don't know how to respond. It's almost as if like he didn't even listen the first time. And by the second time, it almost like just occurs to him like, oh, I probably should show some slight bit of sympathy.
It was like the this is a pull, but the Harry Shearer disc jockey in Wayne's World. I don't know if you guys remember that, but like they go on the show and they're just insulting him the whole time, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, that's great, super excited about the festival," and they're like, you're a loser," and he's just like, "Oh wow, so who else is gonna be there?" He just has like a completely disconnected response.
So disconnected.
To every single thing. And except in this case, instead of being juvenilely insulted, this woman shared probably one of the worst things that could ever happen to anybody. And Ducey's just like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to totally ignore that.
Moving on.
Because the reason why I go out to the bar is to get in touch with real people and what their real concerns are. And then to just
not ideological extremists.
She was an ideologue.
That was a hard left position to be upset about your husband being murdered by the American insurance industry. That's super ideological. So there's a little bit more of like a common sense, moderate American phobia about Guatemalans, as an example.
In my own defense, she didn't have the comment about being poor in America earlier. That's what threw me off. I didn't
know she was going to be quite so explicit the second time around.
Sort of gross.
It's
Anyways, back to you guys.
It's all flattened into equivalent bite-sized pieces of the spectacle.
What I want to know is what Kilmeade would have done, because Kilmeade is on such a contradictory road right now. He either would have been like, he would have been like, you can't blame the president for that, or he would have been like,
that's what he would have said. So if he had insurance, he would have stayed alive, right? Is that what you're trying to argue? That's a little bit. I don't buy that.
But Obama said people could keep their doctors.
Right. Well, that's. Yeah, or with woke Kilmeade, which happens 10% now, he would have been like, yeah, and that's a real indictment of the private insurance industry, I think.
What?
I'm writing a book about
Did
that.
I say that?
Yeah.
All right,
well,
we're going to take a quick break.
Shout out to the Democrats for realizing that not wanting to be murdered by the government is a winning idea that people want. People have. You can run on it.
All right, we're going to
Tester's coming through.
Oh, yes. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Dave Weigel. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program, at the behest of the Central Intelligence Agency, national political correspondent.
Never gets old.
Never does. It doesn't. It actually, it's ongoing. The national political correspondent for the Washington Post, Dave Weigel. Now, Dave, before I brought you on, you said you were working on 3 hours of sleep. If it makes you feel any better, I'm almost right there with you.
Cool. I think we're both going to start babbling coherently the more we talk, so let's get to it.
Yes, let's do this. So you were in D.C. last night watching from the control center. Let's start. I mean, I've already top-lined some of the big, I guess, headlines from this. What was there anything that particularly surprised you that you saw out there?
So I almost want to start with something that didn't surprise me, which was having been to a lot of these suburbs where Democrats were gaining. None of the House flips really shocked me. Even Max Rose in Staten Island is one that popped out to a lot of people last night. Having covered him, having covered Donovan was kind of like a sleepy, entitled incumbent. Rose was impressive, and there was a big Democratic advantage there that he turned out. So I'll start with the opposite of your answer. Now, because the things that surprised me are the same things that surprised everybody else. A point I'm making everywhere today is that, look, Democrats got more votes for governor in Maryland really stands out, Ohio and Florida than Republicans got when they won those races in 2014. And going into this, Democrats kind of had a mantra, a little bit of positive thinking, a little bit of data behind it, that if it was a high turnout election, they were going to win. And there are states where that's true, right? Virginia, that's true. Nevada, that's true. But that did not happen this time. I was surprised at the resilience of the Republican vote to come out for elections with fairly uninspiring candidates at the top of the ballot for them. That's just it's not how Democrats behaved in the midterms in 10 and 14, to their long-lasting political detriment.
So what do you think, what accounts for that? So just to be clear with what you're saying is that Democrats overperformed from their baselines. The problem is that Republicans overperform from their baselines, and maybe their baseline's a little bit higher, but they still overperform too. Like, we saw this in the special elections, it seems to me, that we had both parties overperforming the typical special election numbers, but it just so happened that Democrats overperformed just a little bit more. And in these instances, they didn't. What do you think accounts for that?
Well, so everyone's going to have the same take on this, which is that there's just been a resettling of people's base, of the political bases in this country. Sherrod Brown is a great example to watch here. Debbie Stabenow is a great example to watch, although very different races, where there are those maps in those states look like the Obama 2012 map, and the governor's race in in Ohio, it looks like the Trump map. There's only one county in Ohio, I think the Turnbull County, that voted for Trump in 2016 and voted for Richard Cordray tonight, and this is despite Cordray running a much better campaign than Hillary Clinton, not having her vulnerabilities going into Election Day, very popular. So you have the sorting that you're seeing some kind of apocalyptic thinking today from people like Ian Millhiser at the Center for American Progress, saying if we're just heading into a period where conservative voters will not vote for Democrats at any level for anything, it's hard to see how they ever win back the Senate. Republicans have had this sort of thinking before and been proven wrong and come back, but certainly there hasn't been hard Democratic thinking about how to compete, let's say in Nebraska again. And the last time they achieved anything is when they could win Senate seats in Nebraska.
Right. So the idea being that these sort of tribal allegiances are hardening, and the enthusiasm. We would have anticipated a lull in the enthusiasm in Republicans that we're not seeing. Is that a function of Donald Trump going up there and just because 2 days ago, everybody was saying there's a Trump tax. It costs you 4 points everywhere. Is that the case Is it different?
So
on a Senate
so,
level,
yeah, I
in a
think
House level, or in a governor's level? I mean, how do you sort that out?
It's very consistent, actually. So there's no state where Republicans, the exception of the blue states that have Republican moderate governors, there is no place where Republicans did better in this election than Trump did in 2016. They ran behind him in races they won, like in Indiana, they got about half of his margin. Tennessee, about half of his margin. In Missouri, about McCaskill's going to lose by 6 in a state that he won by 19. So if that tax carried out around the country, that does you have a situation where it's hard for Republicans to win the House, and it is actually. The president, I think, starts 2020 as an underdog. He's got a good economy, but he has an electoral map that looks a lot more like the one that reelected Barack Obama. Minus Ohio, more strength for Democrats in Virginia and Colorado, and then in the long term, this Florida Amendment 4, which is going to lead to a couple 100,000 people coming on the rolls as Democrats. So it's just because of the way the Senate map was structured. Let's say you picked up the Senate, made a chart, and just put half of it on the ballot this year. Probably the Republicans would have lost a couple seats.
Right.
They managed to pick up. We'll see at the end of the night or the end of the week. What do they pick up? Maybe 4 seats in places that the president had won. So 4 of the 10 states the president had won, they gained. In the one Senate seat up this year where Republican was up and Hillary had won, they lost. Right. And they lost despite leading in the polls. So that's sorting. The word tribe gets used a lot. I'm not sure what to call it. But look, where people were outnumbered in 2016, only in a couple cases did Democrats outperform. Did Republicans outperform, and that was just when they had moderate governors. Everywhere else, they ran behind it.
Okay, so, I mean, to boil it down on some level, there are some states that are very supportive of Trump, and in those states, the Republicans did well. There are some states where he's not is supported, and the Republicans did poorly, and it just so happened the luck of the draw this cycle, and presumably, right, every 6 years from now, right, there's going to be more Democratic incumbents up for re-election. Well, I guess now it'll be Republicans too, because they picked up 4, but will be up for re-election then significantly more. It was like 2/3 more, right? Democrats were up for re-election. And so we were talking about this in 2015 even. In anticipation of 2016, people were like, the 2018, the Democrats have to get the Senate in 2016 because in 2018 they're going to get wiped out. I mean, it was this
very realistic conversation where I remember the stakes were, okay, well, if Hillary gets elected, she's got 2 years to do kind of anything at all, and then they're going to have 60 Senate seats, but at least she gets to appoint judges, et cetera, et cetera. It's good that you bring that up too, because I've been thinking right before the 2016 election, I was in Utah and I talked to Jason Chaffetz, who at the time was going to continue leading the House Oversight Committee, and he was promising if they won, they were going to spend the 4 years, but the first 2 years investigating Hillary Clinton, and pretty honest about this. They were just going to have hearings because they said, okay, well, she wins by accident, we're going to beat her in 18 and 20. Republicans are kind of that ruthless in public, and Democrats are not.
Yeah, and the Democrats aren't that ruthless in private either, it feels like.
No, actually, yeah, good point. No, even in private, look, the way that Nancy Pelosi's talking about this, she's in kind of a strange position because she's under no illusions that she's popular.
What's going on with that? Let's talk about the leadership.
She starts the aftermath. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I've seen some polling that she has just absurdly low favorability ratings outside of where she is. Now, maybe it's not her fault because, again, she's been like one of those like 20-year Republican projects to, San Francisco values. She's losing support on the left, it seems to me, as well, within the Democratic Party. So that may account for some of it, too. But what is she thinking? Is she thinking that she's going to run for re-election in 2 years, that she wants to be leader of the, Speaker of the House when maybe the Democrats take back the Senate? I mean, what's the, why? Why is she doing this? Is she waiting for somebody to come to come up from below and letting them get a little more seasoning? Because it doesn't seem like there's any youth coming into the leadership at all.
No, I mean, in my more cruel moments, I refer to the House Democrat leadership as like the gambler who stays at the table trying to break even.
Right.
Just need to get back to even, then I can go home from the casino. Because you've got a leadership team that's been there literally for a decade, had lost 4 elections in a row, and gained a couple seats in 2 of them, but was out of power, and they just are not budging. Even today, they're giving signals they're not going to budge. And so getting a little bit in the weeds, but Pelosi's public strategy here has been to unwind the negative impressions about her by kind of being herself, going on the Colbert Report, talking about bipartisanship. She does think she can have
very
a
much
with
herself.
Trump as far as any human can. It is, and it is, but they just made this bet to kind of a classic baby boomer behavior.
Right.
No, we don't trust anyone else to do this for us, so we're just going to lock ourselves in here, and because the next generation wouldn't do as good a job as us. And you've seen some blanching to that. Like this class that's coming in, so we need to do, once everything's called, we'll do the math on how many people said they wouldn't vote for her for speaker. Beyond that, you have some young talent that's been trying to move up. And the way she was framing her decision leading into this election was, I'm going to be a transitional speaker. So what does that mean? I don't know. The way that a lot of people interpreted it was, she's going to be speaker through the end of this Trump term. And then does she say no one else is good to me? I need to keep running this. I mean, she's going to turn 80 in 2020 in the next couple of years. So if she's serious about the transition, you might see some more hints at that. But she's also said she doesn't want to be seen as a lame duck. So I don't know what that means. Like, the more I describe it, the more confused I get about what her plan is.
And to be clear, I'm not as concerned about her age as I am her political tenure, which months ago she was talking about instituting pay-go. Last night, let's play one of these clips. I don't know which one is more ridiculous from her speech last night. I'm sure you heard this. Is this the one where she's talking about the bipartisan marketplace of ideas? I mean, let's just hear this clip.
Stark contrast to the GOP Congress, the Democratic Congress will be led with transparency and openness so that the public can see what's happening and how it affects them, and that they can weigh in with the members of Congress and with the President of the United States. We will have accountability, and we will strive for bipartisanship with fairness on all sides. We will have a responsibility to find our common ground where we can, stand our ground where we can't, but we must try. We have a bipartisan marketplace of ideas that makes our democracy strong. A Democratic Congress will work for solutions.
All right, Dave, just talk me down here. Is that just like pablum, that they feel like, oh, we have to do this because we've always done it since, the 90s? I mean, I'm not even...
Yeah, I mean, everybody talks like this. I mean, Barack Obama talked like this. Trump talked like this for like 10 seconds after the 2016 election. Ryan talked like this. Although Ryan, because got into much more how we're going to bring back regular order, which no Republican cares about when they have power, or and few Democrats. I think in Pelosi's case, she does believe this. She does believe that when she ran the House, especially in 2007, She was fair. She helped pass TARP. She took some hits when she needed to. She passed Democratic bills. This is just a different theory of politics than Republicans have. She wants there to pass progressive legislation, but not in a way that blows everything up. And I think the way things turned out in 2010, I don't think she ever got over. Where she thought she did pass compromises, keep people safe from tough votes if they needed to, and got wiped out and got demonized. So I think this is what I keep getting back to, where Democrats making this bet that they could keep her on as leader. They never really had this conversation about, well, what if we had a new leader who leads on a clear agenda, starts fresh with the public. They never really did that. They kind of let every candidate run their own campaign. And so the result of that is having Pelosi with this sort of, you said pablum, so I'll just repeat it, this sort of boilerplate about bipartisanship.
But if 2010 stung, what did she learn from it? It doesn't feel like she learned anything.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, this is the same thing with Obama and Biden. When I would hear them on the trail, they would describe like how we need to get back to a certain level of civility. And if you're beyond, if you're on left-wing Twitter, then this is obvious. But if you're any kind of Democrat, you think, well, gee, like Republicans changed the rules and stole a Supreme Court nominee, all the things you could go over the way that Republicans kind of smashed the rule book to gain power. You look at that and you think, why do we keep acting nice? But I would say the first press conference, the first statements after an election by the party that wins are not like legally binding.
Right.
I don't think.
I mean, I know
I
that.
think she does what she wants to set this tone, but I'm not sure if that's how she's going to. So the thing to watch here, to move it forward a little bit, is that Republicans are kind of are pre-gaming almost and saying, well, in a very kind of Brer Rabbit way, well, all right, well, these guys won, but it's really going to backfire if they do any investigations of Trump. They can't do that, and that's just no Democrat faults for that. But they definitely need to be making the assertive argument, and frankly, they won the election with that argument. I mean, I was in as many congressional districts as anybody. If voters were worried that a Democratic Congress would probe the president and ask for Mar-a-Lago contract records, all that stuff, they would have not voted for Democrats. It was pretty clear that Democrats were going to investigate the guy. If you want to be cheeky about it, look, the closing ads that Republicans ran were warning that if you elect Democrats, they're going to impeach the president and bring single-payer health care about. Okay, well, having won,
right?
Maybe you don't do all that, but you won with voters being told, hey, elect these guys, they're going to be unfair to the president. For you to then go ahead and say, hey, how about you release the same level of transparency that every president in history has done up to now? It doesn't seem wild-eyed to me, and it doesn't seem like it lost voters.
Yeah, I mean, that is promises made, promises kept, right? I mean, if
I think so.
All right, well, so let me ask you a couple of questions that struck me as sort of bizarre. How is it, and my understanding is that the gap with Gillum is still closing, and we had somebody call in last night who said that the new Florida licenses that were issued apparently did not scan by the voting machines, when they signed in to vote.
Cool. Good democracy.
And that all those people were given provisional ballots because of some screw up with the 3D imprint on the Florida licenses. Now, I haven't confirmed that.
Florida gonna Florida.
But if it's the case that there are a lot of provisional ballots and Gillum, counts, maybe, I don't know, maybe it becomes closer. Maybe we'll see. But how do you reconcile the idea that Amendment 4, which reenfranchises 1.5 million felons, overwhelmingly passed in Florida, but DeSantis looks like he won? How do you square those two things?
I'm not sure that came across. That was just kind of like a sigh. Provisional ballots are important. They do flip elections sometimes. Democrats at this point, especially in races like states like Georgia rather and Florida, are pretty good now at chasing people who had election day problems, and if they had provisional ballots, going after them. So that is why I think you have not seen a call in the Florida Senate race, for example. That's why there's a couple of races I think they're not going to be resolved for weeks. And if this is something that I think Democrats, you're going to have a discussion from some of the House Democrats about introducing a bill that would not pass, but would bring national attention to voting reform to solve this problem. Because Brian Kemp might end up winning this election after running it pretty badly. The two issues that I think Democrats have begun to highlight as kind of good government issues are voter integrity and gerrymandering. And on both of those, when gerrymandering was on the ballot this year, it got completely wiped out. In Missouri, in Michigan, we're waiting on Utah, but in at least two states, people voted against gerrymandering. I think there's probably a electoral majority for how about we don't make people stand in line for 5 hours? How about we don't screw up the voting machines, et cetera? But Democrats have not, the last time they had power, they didn't do a ton on that issue, and I think they've gotten scared straight since then.
All right. Well, I'm sorry. So I had two questions. That were rolled in there. One was just sort of leading in about maybe the chance that Gillum may picked up. But how do you square the Fourth Amendment in Florida winning, or I should say Amendment 4 or whatever? I can't remember winning so easily, and Gillum losing. Like, how do you? Does that make sense to you? Can you explain that?
I can very easily. So this is like a great little game theory question because on the one hand, the stakes were very high to win the governor's race in Florida. On the other hand, the stakes were high maybe for generations to get this amendment passed. And in Florida, you need 60% of the vote to pass a constitutional amendment. So there was a decision made by the people behind that amendment not to make it super partisan. Now, Andrew Gillum was for it. Ron DeSantis was against it. I believe Rick Scott was against it. Certainly, Rick Scott probably personally denied enough felons' rights to get him the lead he has right now. But they kind of kept Republican big money on the sidelines by not turning this into a partisan cause. And the people behind Amendment 4 very, very cleverly got Coke money, some Republican criminal justice reform money. They kept them on board with this as we can all agree on this good government reform, and so they didn't yoke the Democrats to that. And had they, it's hard to say what would have happened. So in Ohio, you had a ballot measure that failed on criminal justice reform, and the statewide Democratic ticket failed. In Florida, all you needed was this thing to get 59% of the vote, and you would have lost your best chance, perhaps ever, to change that law. So I think it was a strategic decision. But for 100,000 votes in Florida, we're not even asking about it.
I mean,
we're saying, it was brilliant of them to do this. Yeah.
That's amazing, right? I mean, because it also suggests that, like, when you do have races, these special elections, when all the Democrats pour in their national money, that may be counterproductive because you are sort of like triggering, like everybody, like it's like the electorate now has this sort of latent virus that can be triggered by environmental changes. And once the environment changes, they turn into, everything becomes super tribal.
No, it's not just that, but imagine if the president had just tweeted at the start of early voting, I don't know, let me get in the Trump voice here, Florida Amendment 4 is a disgrace, would bring criminals to our streets, vote against it for the troops, something like that. Right. If the president had, used his campaign megaphone to say vote against this, and that had flipped 200,000 votes, that would have been the ball game. So they had to be very careful about this, and that's just a quirk of the way Florida amends its constitution, which to me is not the craziest idea. I think getting 60% of the votes probably good. I mean, North Carolina passed a couple of bad amendments now with 55% of the vote. I don't. So that was just the way that they decided to build the campaign around this.
And how do you explain, let's say, like Ohio, Cordray losing in Ohio, but Walker, losing in Wisconsin, or Whitmore winning in Michigan? Like why does Trump have salience in one place and not the other?
Yeah, that's so basically the question is, it's very cultural. And so exit polls aren't everything. But if there's Appalachia in your state, Trump was very resilient, and if there wasn't, he was not. So let's look at Ohio has always been more conservative than Michigan, but in Ohio on Election Day, especially in Southeast Ohio, I say the voters who were Democrats until Trump came around were very very positive toward the president. In Ohio, 7% of people who had not voted in the midterm, by a 7-point margin, people who never voted in the midterm before voted Republican. They were Trump people who were convinced to come back out. Wow. And then in the upper Midwest, you just have kind of a different political and cultural tradition. And there you see first-time midterm voters broke for Democrats. White voters broke for, not broke for Democrats. I mean, the white vote in Michigan was like Democrats lost it by about 5-6 points. But in West Virginia and Tennessee, in Kentucky, you have a cultural break from the Democratic Party that I don't think they have any plan to repair. I mean, honestly, I thought the best repair plan was the Richard Ojeda campaign, which did about as good as you can imagine any campaign doing in that state at this time, and that wasn't enough. So right. I don't think they have an answer. It's just the same thing. If you're asking Republicans, hey, so what's your plan to go back and win Fairfax County, Virginia? I mean, they don't have one. Those voters culturally have broken away, and maybe they'll vote for some future governor who runs as a moderate, but they're not going to vote. They're not going to vote for a Trump Republican Party, just as the Ashtabula County Democratic voter is gone, and they're not going to vote for any Democrat except Sherrod Brown.
So where is the sort of, I guess, where's the best place for Democrats to fish? If we're talking about West Virginia and anything that touches Appalachia is like, don't bother, really, right? I mean, unless you're willing to be Joe Manchin. I mean, Joe Manchin outperformed, other Democrats by what, like 50 points, right? I mean, his state went for, we talking about West Virginia, Joe Manchin state went 45, what was it, 45 at least points for Trump, and he won his race by 5 points. That's a 50-point swing. And Joe Manchin, from the perspective of most Democrats, other than the fact that he has a D and 65% of the time you get him to vote with Democrats, he's a louse. But so where can Democrats win without having to be louses?
Most of the country is the answer. I mean,
that they haven't. That they haven't.
On this map, I'm saying most of the country when it comes to. I'm probably repeating myself. I made this point earlier, but there in Michigan, in basically the states that make up like a Obama 2012 electoral majority, they can pull that off. And they can't in places where just they used to have populist Democrats and they don't anymore. So step back a few paces. Democrats decided in this cycle not to have a conversation where they kind of elevated pro-life Democrats. And they could have won some primaries if they wanted to. I mean, Colin Peterson's like the last of these guys. Minnesota, he won his primary, he won his election. He's safe, he's sticking around. But I don't think you didn't see what Republicans thought they were going to see, which was this policing of only nominating the most left-wing candidates. But they did not nominate the kind of Democrats who used to win in these states, which involves breaking with the party. And I frankly think the kind of purity test folks who were angry at Manchin and wish he would. There were people chanting at Manchin during the Kavanaugh vote for him to switch parties. You just can't get away with that. You could, overthrow the government, write a new constitution so that we have proportional representation or a parliament like a normal country. But as long as you have every state getting 2 senators, they don't have a plan to fix this.
Right. Dave Weigel, anything that we left unsaid, do you think? Or are you just so desperate to take a nap there that there's nothing?
I'm going to say it. It all came down to Waukesha County. It all came down to how Scott Walker could not deliver his usual vote for Waukesha County. That was the election.
My understanding is he needed 70% there. What did he get?
In the mid-60s, and that was when they knew he was cooked. God bless that little county. It's never done us wrong, except for the many, many times when it's done us wrong.
We had Josh Orton on the program yesterday. He said if Walker doesn't break 70 there, he loses. There you go.
Yep. That's the suburbs. That is the Trump effect. And hey, the final thing to run on or to leave on. This is an election where the party in power could brag about 3.7% unemployment. What does this election look like if they can't? I don't know. That's something that needs to be litigated. But this president has never had to face an election are not going rosy for him economically. Not that I'm wishing that for the country, but there's a lot of scenarios we've never seen yet. The one we did where Democrats are trying to convince voters, hey, the economy's great, but vote for us, you know what? It actually mostly worked for them.
That's true. Good point. And if the steam runs out of the Obama economy, Donald Trump may have some explaining to do. Dave Weigel, Washington Post, thanks so much for your time today, buddy. I really appreciate it. I know you're exhausted.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'll talk to you anytime.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, folks. We're going to head into the fun half, wherein we will take your phone calls. Obviously, results are still going to come, but let's leave on this. Scott Walker had when he found out that he lost, I guess, this morning. He posted this on his Twitter feed. "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." And I guess that's Psalm 118:24, if I remember correctly, off the top of my head.
Yeah, good memory.
Thank you. And so...
That's how I cheer myself up, too. I look at pictures of sort of like highly edited sunsets and put some psalms over it. And that's what I did last night after I got home, actually.
I wonder if that's the Great Lake or an ocean. Because he's in Wisconsin. He probably doesn't spend a lot of time in the ocean. He can now. So, Scott Walker, I am sure you will go off and get a job with Koch Industries and continue doing horrible things.
He's going to mop up at Foxconn.
There you go. Exactly. Or maybe he'll get a job with Foxconn. Offers him $5 billion worth of state money and then walks across the street and starts collecting on it.
It's a perfectly viable gulag option for Scott Walker.
There you go.
A Foxconn job. If all Foxconn jobs were former politicians, I'd be cool with it.
What do you think his Foxconn job would be? My guess is it would be
lobbyist for Foxconn.
I feel like he would be positioned in the no-show wing of the warehouse, where he just got to send an assistant down there once a week to press a punch card, and they just send him a big check. That's called a kickback. And he certainly earned it in terms of what he gave them. Yep. Scott Walker, bye-bye. All right.
Walk away, Scott. Walk away from the governorship.
Where is Dave Rubin and his walk away movie? Oh, can we play this walk away thing? Yeah, let's.
It's kind of long, though.
It's kind of long, but you know what, folks? This is pretty cheery. I think you're going to enjoy this. The great Vic Berger. Now, you all recall several months ago, we played a video. What was the name of that guy who was running the walk away campaign? He was some New York like model. Not like
that guy.
Not a hugely successful model, I don't think. Who was announcing to the world that he had been a Democrat. Now he was going to walk away. Here it is. It's the Walk Away March. What was the name of the guy?
The Poor Man's Milo.
The Poor Man's Milo. But he I can't remember what. Let's see. He had a lot of. He was going to have Dinesh D'Souza was going to be there. Can't you do the a Contact maybe, or who was the Prescott? Yeah, his name's all over it. I bet. Let's see what we got in that.
Does
Prescott.
it matter what his name is?
Why are we so
the
worried
fact that we
about
can't
plugging
remember it shows that he's
Brandon
failed.
Straka.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
that's why. That's a funny name.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
funny name. So
Fair
Brandon
enough.
Straka had this walk away movement. And you'll recall Dave Rubin. I mean, go back into Dave Rubin's tweets. I don't have the time for this, like 3 or 4 months ago. And it was as if Dave Rubin was like on a rolling ayahuasca trip or something like that. Because he was like, hey, I woke up this morning and I had visions of people walking away from the Democratic Party. And we're on the verge of something really huge. And African Americans are about to abandon, because Dave is so in touch with what the African American zeitgeist is, and they're all gonna walk away.
Larry Elder told me.
Yeah, we're all walking away. Many people have asked me, and then he talks about walk away, and then Dave Rubin canceled his appearance at the walk away thing. He never addressed it, and here is Brandon Straka's. Walk away. They were going to get millions, or at the very least, hundreds of thousands, or at the very least, tens of thousands, or at the very least, thousands, or at the very least, hundreds, or at the very least, tens. And they delivered on those tens of people. And here is Vic Berger's reinterpretation of the videos that came from there. It's a little bit long, but you deserve this, folks. Enjoy it. Democrats took the House. What happens next is going to be a combination of oversight and all hell breaking loose, I believe, in the lame duck session. But here is that walk away march.
All right, everybody. Keep walking. Walk, walk, walk. Again, if you're going to be part of the walk, you need to walk now. So to make sure everybody keeps moving. Now is the time to walk if you're walking. If you're going to walk, you want to go now. So to make sure everybody keeps moving. If you're going to walk, you need to go now.
I heard a song when I was walking up here called Lock Her Up. Lock Her Up. And you know, I started dancing when I heard it. They said, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. Hey! Yes. I was at the White House yesterday.
Pause it for 1 second.
That guy's awesome.
Just want to remind you. I just want to remind you. These are all former Democrats who were singing
totally.
"Lock Her Up," and then they realized they were going to get off the Democratic plantation.
How great would it be if Obama showed up?
That's it.
Well, lock her up. Lock her up.
That's why they all walked away, was because they wanted to join in the cheer. Go ahead.
My fellow superhero Kanye made the shirt.
I was at the White House yesterday. It was a pleasure to be there, to see Donald Trump in person at the White House. I love you too. So, say USA, 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 USA. I love you too. Walk away, walk away, walk away. I love you, America. Thank you.
Man, this guy's career did not go the way he wanted it to go.
Hey,
That's
we're
so
about to hear
sad.
some more music, and I hate to do this because we're so upbeat, but I'm reading that there was a horrible shooting in Pittsburgh at a synagogue, and 8 people have been killed. Hey, JT, make everyone happy.
You guys inspired today or what? The reason I'm here today is because I wrote a song for our movement.
I wish we could play that.
Somehow, by the grace of God, it went viral. I got a show on Patriot
true?
Soapbox on Sunday
welcome.
nights, you guys, 9 o'clock. Come check me out. I am JT Wild.
Take your time, dude.
Woo! It's awesome. Woo! 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 Michael Flynn Jr.'s here. I want to dedicate this song to his dad. Don't you cry, 'cause I'll be coming home to you.
Hey, look here, we got a saying in the biker world. If I had never...
If you're gonna walk, you need to go now. Now is the time to walk if you're walking. If you're gonna walk, you want to go now. Again, if you're gonna be part of the walk, you need to walk now. Get into the right motorcade. Once that passes, you can't be part of it.
Wow.
Thank you, guys. That's called Arm Yourselves.
I wish I had the ability to award the Academy Award.
That's my preferred
filmmaking.
way to take in reality.
That is
Also sassy
Rourke
Trump.
Burger, such a genius.
That's so good.
All right, folks, enjoy. We're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half. Don't forget, you can support this show by becoming a member. Go to jointhemajorityreport.com. You support our daily show, shows like we had last night. We're going to have debate shows, I would imagine, coming up in the next 2 years. We're going to have coverage of maybe hearings. Let's hope we're not covering any more
this
Supreme
Trump,
Court hearings.
Press conference is wild right now.
Oh yeah,
and
all right. Well, we'll cut to it after the break. All right. Don't forget TMBS. You can go to patreon.com/TMBS and the Antifada. Patreon.com/the Antifada, and of course, Literary Hangover at patreon.com/Literary Hangover. All right, folks. See you in the and don't forget Michael's live show. You can check it out on the homepage. It's in February. Buy tickets now. Tickets almost going to run out. All right. See you in the fun half. 646-257-3920. It's a nice feeling. I totally get it. They are. You turn on the TV, some iteration of me. Zero-sum game. It's a nice feeling. Zero-sum game. Zero-sum game. It's a nice feeling. You're going to lose your status. He's the king of his zero-sum game. I totally get it. Zero-sum game. They are. Zero-sum game. Sweetheart, get me a beer. It's a nice feeling. It's real. It's a nice feeling. Sweetheart. Get me a beer. All right, so Donald Trump just had a press conference. Look, I know people don't want to see this guy, but he's the president of the United States, and there's going to be a lot of, I think there's going to be a lot of craziness over the next couple of months. There was a report in New York Magazine today that Donald Trump Jr. has been telling people that he thinks he's going to be indicted I can tell you that I have heard for a while from, third-hand sources, not enough to really talk about on its own, but
CIA.
I've heard that as well. And certainly there's a lot of people who've speculated that, because Donald Trump Jr. is one of the few people who have not been brought in, who, by Mueller is my understanding, and yet he's all over the place. So in terms of possible relationships with foreign entities, if you will. This is Donald Trump at the press conference following the loss of the House.
Another question, Mr. President, if I may ask
Peter,
one other
go ahead.
question. Are you worried?
That's enough. That's
Mr.
enough.
President,
That's
I was
enough.
going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr.
Excuse
President,
me. That's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other
Peter,
question,
let's
if
go.
I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have?
I'm not concerned
indictments-
about anything with
that you
the
may have
Russian
indictments coming down?
investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Yes, I am, because I'm having an anxiety attack.
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
Oh.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his
Well, I'm
butt
not a
like
big
the rest
fan of
us.
yours either, so
I
to be
understand.
honest.
So let me ask you a question if I can. You repeatedly said...
You aren't the best.
Mr. President, you repeatedly, over the course of
Okay,
the...
just sit down, please. Well, when you report fake news, when you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
Mr. President, over the course of the last several days of the campaign, sir, at the end of the campaign, you repeatedly said that Americans need to fear Democrats. You said Democrats would unleash a wave.
His anxiety attacks are hilarious. Rage-xiety. I love it.
Started pacing.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
he's super anxious.
The problem is he doesn't have an answer for it. He doesn't have an answer for this question, and it's because he's super nervous about it that he cannot come up with. I mean, right? Like in the White House, they should be sitting down and saying, when you get a question about Russian indictments, you say, "Look, it's a hoax." Allowing for him, it's a hoax. You can keep asking me these questions about the hoax, but all you're doing is you're wasting the American people's time. I mean, I can answer this question sufficiently, and but Trump can't handle it.
Well, frankly, I'm not a big fan of yours either, Samantha.
There you go. I mean, what I do appreciate about this is to see some measure, I don't want to overstate this, but some measure of solidarity amongst the press corps where they will all basically say, like, you can't pit us against each other. Now, frankly, I'm not a fan of a whole lot of them anyways, but at the very least, if they're basically saying, we're not going to allow you to play us off each other so that you can avoid a question, that would be a very good practice to begin. All right, now
There's a lot of cuck energy in that room.
Now Trump has to deal with the Mueller investigation. It's unclear. They must have some strategy at this point, and it's unclear what it's going to be. I think we're going to get a better notion in the next couple of days. Maybe they think he doesn't have anything. Maybe he thinks that it's Trump Jr. is going to pay the price and he's going to be able to pardon him or something like that. But here is Donald Trump being asked, what are you going to do about Mueller? Because, folks, it's Mueller time.
Mr. President, going back to the Russia investigation and the potential investigations from the now Democratic majority in Congress, some say that you could stop all this by declassifying.
I could fire everybody right now, but I don't want to stop it because politically I don't like stopping it. Yeah. It's a disgrace. It should have never been started because there was no crime. Everybody has conflicts. They all have conflicts over there that are beyond anything that anybody's ever seen in terms of conflicts, from the fact that people ask for jobs, from the fact that they have very good friends on the other side, like really good friends like Comey, who, by the way, lied and leaked, and also leaked classified information. Nothing happened there. It might, perhaps, maybe something's happening that I don't know about. I stay away from it. But you know what I do? I let it just go on. They're wasting a lot of money, but I let it go on because I don't want to do that. But you're right. I could end it right now. I could say that investigation is over. But it's really, it's a disgrace, frankly. And it's an embarrassment to our country. It's an embarrassment to the people of our country. And it's too bad. Go ahead.
What about the declassification of the documents? Some say that that would clear it all up.
We're looking at that. No, we're looking at that very seriously.
Very seriously.
Very serious time.
Is that still about the Comey memo?
Comey's a terrible guy.
I can't tell what they're looking to declassify in that instance. I think it could be documents that came from
It could be all of it.
intelligence committees.
We could declassify. It could be everything.
Look, there's going to be there's a big difference now because you're not going to have Devin Nunes running interference, and you're going to have the Democrats in the House have control over these documents and access to these documents, and the ability to perhaps, of course, stop harassing the FBI and have the ability to perhaps coordinate with Mueller's investigation. Where do you not want us to go? What do you need to be pristine?
I could fire all of them. They could be fired. Everybody in Congress can be fired. You're a terrible person. You never tell Sarah Huckabee she looks fat. So rude. People have no civility
This
anymore.
Sarah Huckabee
I
thing,
could
too,
fire
is such
you.
a perfect tell, right? Like, you're not being mean to me. I don't
care. I can defend myself.
I can defend myself.
Yeah.
When you go after Sarah Huckabee, who is,
let's face
a
it.
4.
I remember, yes. Wow, anybody could pick on a 3. You haven't grown out of that? Pathetic.
So here, new news out of Arizona. In the Cinema McCaster race, is that it? McSally. There are 600,000 ballots outstanding. So we'll see what happens in Arizona. Don't know what the latest is about Florida. Tester is now confirmed to have won. So we'll see what happens with Arizona. Florida, I think, is basically a done deal for Nelson, but I don't think anybody's declared in that race. And I don't know if we have anything else extant.
No. Well, I mean, I want to, even though obviously it's a huge uphill, I think, Georgia will go to runoff, it looks like. And Stacey Abrams isn't conceding it, and we should support her. And frankly, they should do what AMLO did in 2006 in Mexico. They should have an encampment in Atlanta and protest ongoingly a stolen election.
Well, I do know, and this makes more sense to me now in the context of there being a runoff. There was a suit filed, I don't know if it was by the ACLU, to keep Kemp from overseeing this election.
Right.
And look, you have something this close, and it was widely reported that Kemp was personally disenfranchising tens of thousands of people. Who knows if that's going to happen, but
apparently he was freaking out at April Ryan too, and he said that when she asked him about voter suppression that she was being hostile.
Snowflake.
It's like Matt said last night in the Chapo stream. Venezuela and post-1979 Iran elections are more legitimate than the governor's race in Georgia.
Great for Matt. But yeah, I think that's a classic
Matt was
case.
making a lot of sense.
That's a classic case of where are the UN inspectors who are watching.
Samantha Power actually did pull that card out. She said when she was UN, she was like, if I was still ambassador to the United Nations and you reported to me all of the dynamics of Georgia, I would be immediately calling for
Of
immediate. Yeah, I
course.
mean, it goes without
Yeah.
saying. Well, we say of course, but actually, people in that position don't usually pull that card out. So it was a good step that she did that.
It just so happens that America has the nukes, so they're not going to do that.
Brian Kemp
but yeah,
has the fucking nukes.
This is the world's most dangerous and wealthy banana republic.
Let's hear. This is a little bit depressing, but this guy, it's going to be interesting to see what his future is in politics. Beto O'Rourke loses the Senate race, I guess now by 3 percentage points as more votes came in. About 200,000 out of almost 8 million votes. So not a huge loss. But here he is giving his concession speech and dropping the F-bomb.
I want to thank this amazing campaign of people, not a dime from a single pack, all people, all the time, in every single part of Texas. All of you showing the country how you do this. I'm so fucking proud of you guys.
There you go.
So he's allowed to say it.
Boris Epstein was very
He
scandalized
can say
by
it,
that.
right. Boris
So
Epstein was?
meanwhile, Beto Rourke says swear words, but the president is demonized for other things that the liberal media says he does. And that is the comment for Sinclair Media. I like it. Boris Epstein even looks like he's having trouble reading the teleprompter at his own name. Like, I'm Boris Epstein.
Trying to call into the calling machine.
Collusion is illusion. It is fake. What the president says.
I do not like that.
Welcome to the family dinner. It's Bill O'Reilly.
Oh, let's see here.
Fucking hate your mother. It's Bill
Thank you
O'Reilly.
for calling into the majority report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Okay, I'm trying to see. There we go. Yeah, I know. I got it. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 610. Let's try this. Calling from a 614 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello? 614.
Hello, yeah, this is Jordan from Ohio. How are you?
Good. Jordan, what's on your mind?
Yeah, thanks for the shows. Coverage was great. I watched you guys last night and gritted my teeth and made it. And I have to say, like a lot of people have said, there is a lot to be happy about, but not so much in Ohio.
Right. Well, Sherrod Brown.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys have had David Daley on, and he did that book about Project Redknapp.
Yep.
And it just shows how building those structures insulates those systems from quick changes. So while we had better turnout, we had better turnout in gerrymandered districts with a lot more Republicans too. So there you have it.
Right. And I mean, look, the reality is though that doesn't implicate the governor's race, right? And so I think there's something in Ohio that is unattractive, with all due respect, in terms of the general population.
Wow, that's very personal to me.
Well,
it's a chapter in my book called Blaming the Electorate, the Ohio edition.
Somebody like Elizabeth Cady on, to talk about what people get wrong about Appalachia, and when Appalachia touches electoral politics, what doesn't sell here is precisely what Republicans have spent 25 years and countless millions of dollars promoting on the airwaves, which is Pelosi's milquetoast endorsements of nothing at all. Pablum, I think you said.
Right.
And, if you want to tap into Ohio, and if you want to tap into what Ohio has, it's time to get angry and be sewer socialists and get on with it. Because the things that the National Democratic Party is selling in the ways that they're selling them to Ohioans by bringing somebody like Rich Cordray in after he was easily tarred as being participatory in Ted Strickland's governorship. You know, it's tough to rally people that have been eating shit for 25 years after NAFTA, and after the steel industry goes away, and after auto manufacturing goes away. And you can't tell me that doesn't matter. Approaches matter.
I mean,
50-state approaches matter.
I mean, you know, Sherrod Brown is, it seems to me, on some level, is, you know, provides a good counterpoint.
He won by 100,000 votes.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't crush anybody, and Renacci might be the most repugnant human being to yet grace the stage. I mean, you look at that guy's history, it's disgusting. And Sherrod Brown, you know, God bless him, he's got no interest. You know, he's got no aspiration beyond where he is right now.
Right. Well, I mean, hopefully other, I guess, Democratic politicians will follow in his mold on some level.
Yeah, I mean, I like what we've got. You know, Tim Ryan, Joe Schiavone, you know, those guys that are kind of striving for bigger, better places in local and regional politics. But, you know, power being power, it's just not moving quick enough. And Ohio is not getting, I don't think, the messaging it needs. You know, you saw how badly Issue 1 got crushed, and, you know, that was largely because they were able to paint it as something other than what it was.
Right.
And, you know, it's messaging. You know, those things matter. So, you know, hey, we're going forward, and there are wins and losses, and we're going to keep participating, believe me. But, you know, it would do national leadership a lot of good to think about the kind of message they put on the air in Ohio.
We're going over. Oh yeah,
look at these districts. Like
a lot of red districts in Ohio,
and how they're drawn, just like
crazy ass districts.
I mean, you look at that gerrymander, man. That is no joke. And then you couple that with the people that do have it good in Ohio, and there's a serious culture of contentment. You know, people that do have it good have their district drawn such a way that it's easy to get the people that they want reelected. I mean, Rick Neal was a great candidate in 2015 against Stivers, and Stivers is the money man for the Republican Party, and he didn't even have a chance. And, I mean, this city and county voted Hillary. It was, you know, 15 is drawn in such a way as to make it completely inaccessible. And, you know, until we get some level of state control back where we can, or that amendment goes through and they actually draw decent maps again, we're in a tough spot. So, you know, you want to get people in the street, that might be a better option than telling them that Nancy Pelosi's coming back for another turn at the wheel. So thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Appreciate the call.
Nancy Pelosi is very inspiring to Republican voters.
I mean, there's a lot of evidence that that's actually the case.
I know. I'm not being facetious
I mean,
at all.
that in and of itself should be.
It's like they're allergic to taking that lesson, though. That's the Hillary problem too.
Yeah,
and I don't care.
It's not
if
just
they don't
like
me.
I don't like. No, I mean, the problem is it's not just a question of they. It's like she's not going to let go of power, and it is the difficulty has always been, at least traditionally, that it's very hard to amass power when the currency in the House is currency. Right? Like if you don't have your fundraising coffers are not overflowing, then you don't have the ability to go out and help fundraise for other people. And it's very transactional at that level where it's just like, that dude helped me out. I don't agree with them on politics, but they helped me out. So I'm going to slide them a vote because it's going to mean, you know, more help for me to get reelected. And there's not enough of a constituency in my district that cares about that. I mean, that's basically the dynamic, and it may be changing on some level because basically technology now allows, you know, a progressive in wherever whatever district they're in to nationalize their fundraising skills, and they don't have to rely on corporations in there who are interested in what committee they're sitting on or that are represented in their district. So who told me that Seth Moulton was, Brendan said that Seth Moulton out of Massachusetts was contemplating a run. That would be great.
I don't know. I mean, I probably would be more inclined to support Ryan over Seth Moulton, frankly.
Why is that in terms of his politics?
Yeah. They're both bad, in my view, on sort of some kind of, I mean, Moulton even worse, arguably, because he's in Massachusetts with a sort of third way talk and third way affiliations. But I think Ryan is much more steady on trade and economic issues than Moulton. I mainly heard Moulton talk about Russia stuff, frankly.
I mean, I would like someone who is safe in their seat, but that's
Ryan's safe in his. Those are both safe seats for sure.
Part of the problem is that just like where is the Ryan? I don't find that to be terribly progressive either. And
No, yeah, I mean, well, Barbara Lee is the one who's progressive, but she's she's definitely. I mean, that's another an older California Democrat, but I think she's night and day.
And
with
hasn't
Nancy
she
Pelosi.
not
She's gonna be
specifically not expressed interest?
well because she is going to be in the leadership. Right? Isn't she going to be?
I think
forget
so.
her. She's up. Yeah, she's in the.
But she
leadership.
specifically said she's not interested
she's not
in
gonna go
her
after-
Pelosi's
that's
job.
true.
So
who? I mean, who else is in? I don't even know. Who else
there's
is in that.
this is not something that we have
Yeah.
that much control over. Frankly, I would get rid of Schumer first. If I had the ability to wave a wand,
Schumer's just
and only had
catastrophic.
one wish, it would be Schumer.
Careful what you say on air.
No, I'm just saying.
No, I'm just kidding. But why do you think you say sometimes that people in the Senate are apparently satisfied with him?
I've talked to some other people who say that people in the Senate are satisfied with him because there's no point in being public about it if you don't have an option. And that there is some measure of discontent with him, but there isn't a sense of who could replace him at this point.
Seems like a bad sign in and of itself.
Well, but part of the problem is, again, Schumer fundraises super easily. And so he has the ability to go around and help other people. And when, smaller donation fundraising, really replaces it, the value of that type of relationship will diminish. But in the meantime, more often than not, that's how people function.
Here's the bad news. We're losing seats, and I got a bunch of court appointments have been confirmed for Trump, but I have shekels.
I wouldn't necessarily ethnicize it so much.
Oh, yeah, don't ethnicize it. No, there's nothing ethnicizing about that at all.
Let's go to the phone.
Sometimes reality is ethnicized.
352. Well, he's not actually giving them shekels. He's giving them dollars.
No, they actually go through a special wire transfer.
Calling from a 352 area code. Who's this?
Hey, Sam. My name is Sandy. I'm calling from Gainesville, Florida.
What's happening, Sandy?
Well, I'm highly disappointed today. I'm with Indivisible, and we knocked on 5,000 doors in our county since April and really worked hard, and we turned out to vote in our county here, but, in our city. We're Gainesville, as you may know, is the home of the University of Florida, and so we're in, one of those islands of blue and a sea of red. And it just wasn't enough to overcome anything really on a local level or the state level or the federal level. So I guess the most upsetting thing is Gillum. That's a gut punch. It's just I think we had a lot of progressive hopes riding on that, and it would have meant so much to our black community. And not only did he lose, but it's really a statement that our white voters have been with Trump for 2 years now and seen all of this, and they're like, yeah, we're cool with this.
Right.
And just all in on it, It's just very disturbing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I appreciate you guys giving me some hope. Today on a national level, I guess I'm just kind of concentrating on Florida and just it's tough stuff.
Well, next time around, Sandy, there's going to be a lot more new voters, hopefully. So, hang in there. Appreciate the call.
Yep.
Calling from a 240 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, is that you?
Yeah. Is that you from 240?
Yeah, it's Vito from Maryland. How you doing?
Hey, Vito, what's going on?
So, I guess, I don't think it was that bad. I mean, my sister lives in Florida. She was pretty inconsolable this morning.
Right.
But I tried to like tell her not to get her hopes up. But, it's hard to do. She was highly invested in it, and, she did a lot of canvassing and all that, and was pretty disappointed. But I think overall it wasn't a complete total, I did win the office pool, it looks like.
Well, in that case,
so that's
Vito.
Yeah, I don't want to make it all about me, but that is like beer and pizza money for a month for me. So the one thing I wanted to say was I think we need to take a little bit of stock in or sort of face up to, I don't think that the economic populism is going to override the tribal culture stuff unless there's some type, like in 2008, that was sort of an economic, recession, and I think you can probably say the same thing in 92. But I think overall, I'm not sure that, what I would really like is for someone to do some type of research and find out the people that voted for Trump in 2016, or that didn't vote, and then voted Democratic this time, and find out exactly why they voted Democratic. And I would imagine it's not based on economic populism, but I might be wrong. But
I'll tell you, Vito, next week we got John Sides on. He's written a book called The Identity Crisis, the 2018 Presidential Campaign Battle for the Meaning of America. That's a question I think that I'll end up posing to him. Appreciate the call.
Well, we saw a number of victories from progressive Democrats and losses from centrist Democrats.
Yeah, we've seen losses from progressives and losses from moderates and losses. It's all across the board, and so it's unclear. It depends on where they are, right? Joe Manchin won. Not progressive.
Yeah. I guess looking at the bigger picture and the way forward for regular people in this country, it has to be economic populism. And I don't know that maps directly onto electoral strategy because this country has so little class consciousness, and that's a huge problem.
But I think we all agree that the favorable policy sets is an economic populist set of policies.
And not just policies, like ideas to take action around.
Okay. Ideas to take action around or policies.
And build solidarity.
Yes. Build solidarity. But in this context, I think what we're talking about and what he was saying was electoral politics.
Yeah, I know. I always want people to look at the bigger picture when we talk about this stuff. So sorry if that seemed to come out of left field.
Right. Calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? 610. That person is gone. Calling from a 631 area code. Who's this?
Hey, Sam. It's Tim from New Paltz. How you doing?
Good, Tim. What's on your mind? Got to be quick. We got another 35 people on the line.
Quick. I have a quick question for Jamie. Is Matt alive?
Yes. He's
okay,
fine.
Good. Okay, good. Prayers up for my little treat boy. And for Sam, I'm in District 19, same as a lot of people who call, I feel.
Yep.
And the rest of the country may be bummed about Gillum and Texas, but we are pretty happy here that the wretched John Faso is gone.
Yeah.
And now we helped bring New York State Senate fully under real Democratic control. And there's just something very satisfying about Faso losing when his only strategy seemed to be, my opponent is black. And he got owned.
That's totally unfair. He said he was a rapper. That has nothing to do with race.
Yeah, no, there were other ads too that were super
I'm
racist.
so tired of Democrats always playing the race card.
But I'll tell you,
He's playing the race card.
and FASO also, I think, there was a tremendous amount of animus towards FASO up there.
Yeah, he's everyone.
I mean, months ago, I saw signs that just said "FASO lies," not even seemed to be tied in, not even seemed to be tied into the election. I mean, it was a function of when that woman approached him about his vote on the ACA, and people did not forget that up there.
I have a funny, two funny numbers from that same district. Apparently, and you would know, Neal and Greenfield, which I guess are both the independent and green candidates, they both lost.
Yeah, they're like Jimmy Dore candidates.
They both lost to blank ballots.
And I will say this, Tim, thanks for the call. I'll say this too, that it's the Greens up there used to have a significant amount of support. I remember seeing, I don't know, 10 years ago, Joel Covell, maybe it was longer than that, who was, I think he ran for something, a big green seat, and he was up in that neighborhood,
Yeah, but
a lot of that bread and circus stuff.
What a
going
different, and also what a different time.
Yep.
Because Richard Wolff ran for mayor of New Haven as a Green Party candidate in the 80s, got 30-something%. Joe Covell was a serious ecologist, Marxist academic. I mean, I don't think it was a viable strategy, but the Green Party used to be, I think a much more serious thing.
Calling from a 928 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam?
Yes.
Oh, hey, this is Joseph from Navajo Nation.
Joseph, what's on your mind?
I'm just calling in about, so is he kind of following the Native American races? In New Mexico, we see Deb Haaland actually win, which is pretty good. I think.
She's a great candidate. I spoke to her at Netroots Nation, and was it on this program or was it on Ring of Fire?
It was live on this program.
You can go back and hear a pretty good interview with her from Netroots over the summer, and she's pretty progressive, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and then also Sharice Davids in Kansas.
Mm-hmm. That was a bit of an upset.
Yeah,
actually.
And there were a few others like Paulette Jordan in Idaho, they lost, and another Navajo, James Courage Singer in Utah, they lost as well. But I do feel pretty good about Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids.
Well, appreciate you calling in, giving them a shout out. Thanks, Joseph.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you think there's any lessons to be drawn between Tester and Donnelly? I'm seeing people talk about Mitchell Cares here. Says what he didn't notice was, what I did notice just from Tester's ads, that he did really stick to the issues and didn't do a bunch of bullshit triangulating or corny "I'm going to build the wall" stuff like Donnelly. Is there, I think, maybe a limited message there between how to run in those kind of states if you're going to run as a Democrat. Don't be like a waffle or something. I don't know if that's a phrase.
I mean, maybe. Tester was not terribly good on immigration from years back. And so he may have already built his anti-immigrant bona fides. And I can't remember exactly what the vote was, but I'm going back now 5 or 6 years. Maybe
he's also got a flat top haircut. So.
Also, doesn't Montana have a little bit more of a populist?
Well,
I
he
feel like
certainly
there's
ran
a little
that
bit.
way.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, and also there was that governor there several years ago. What was his name? Schweitzer. I feel like Indiana relative to Montana has a little bit more of a kind of. It's connected with
That's
prairie populism
a
bit more than Indiana.
Is we are getting the racism of the country is in more relief now.
Absolutely.
But is there more? Are we starting to see variation geographically in it?
And I think also
it feels like it, right?
Definitely.
I mean, that's sort of
definitely.
what
Yeah.
I think Weigel was saying with if it touches on Appalachia. Now, our caller from Ohio seemed to think that was maybe too broad a brush. But
so like Max Baucus would contradict this because he was definitely a massive corporatist. But on the other hand, my understanding is Montana had Brian Schweitzer, who was a populist, and Tester, who ran and has
the first time around.
Yeah.
He in his primary, that was Marcos used that race as a way of destroying the DLC.
Right, and Tester, and even
Very
still is
publicly.
not as good as you would want, but he has a certain populist streak. Whereas in Indiana, the last Democrat they had was Evan Bayh.
Tester,
so that's a very different.
Tester
math and
voted against
reality
the
there.
initial Dreamer bill. Someone reminds me.
That's just disgusting vote, obviously.
That's
but I
when
do think there's a difference between. I think if you're running in Montana, there might be a path. Well, and also Schweitzer praised Pat Buchanan at times. They made appeals to horrible right-wing populism, but I think there is more of that economic populism in Montana than there is in Indiana, I think.
Right. Well, but also my point being that
And he
it doesn't
inoculated
come off
himself
as
through
fake.
terrible votes.
It doesn't come off as fake if that's the way you've always been.
Right.
It doesn't look like he's triangulating.
Did Donnelly vote well on immigration in the past?
I don't know. I think his tone became, but I suspect he did that in response to polling that made him look like he was looking bad.
Also, did he win? What was he a guy who had some type of just truly obscene Republican who said did he win against some type of rape doesn't exist kind of candidate several years ago? I'm not sure because my impression of Donnelly was that he's a guy who won by default, and Tester, good, bad, whatever, clearly is a distinct political personality who's winning on his own merits, for better or for worse.
Let's go to the IMs. I just like us to remember, Denver Dave, the so-called bigger picture is often a collage of little pictures. I know this sounds like it's coming out of left field, but many people in the U.S. are busy dealing with little things every day. Elections and macroeconomic changes are both big issues. Okay. Bronze plan. Katie Hill won the 25th congressional seat in California on a progressive platform. This seat has been Republican for the past 25 years. Also, she's millennial. I mean, I think all three of those things are relevant in terms of winning.
Combo breaker.
Female, young, progressive.
What you do on Literary Hangover, I think it's disgusting.
And here is Steve Kornacki with some of the exit polling that, portends well for what it gives a sense as to what Democrats need to do to win over those independent voters. And my understanding is that I think for the most part, this election, independents broke for Democrats more often than they have, more than they did for Republicans for the first time, I think, in a long time, if not ever. More often than not, people who identify as independent are...
They'll take the tax cut?
Right. But here is what Kornacki breaks down in terms of what is the most salient issue with voters, and it gives the Democrats in the House an opportunity. They can pass legislation. It obviously will not pass in the Senate, but they can make the Senate, perhaps be seen as an obstacle to the type of reform people want.
And if we also show you among independents here, this is the interesting one, I think, sort of the tiebreakers in an election. What wins out there among independents by a 2-to-1 margin? It is health care over immigration as the issue most on their minds.
Well, that is another tea leaf, as they say, to read in this one.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I don't know how tea leafy it was, but
it's a bit more, I think, clear than a tea leaf typically would be.
I think Chuck Todd should drink more tea leaves.
It's going to gives a roadmap for what Democrats need to do going forward, I think. And
who knew that not wanting to literally die would be a winning campaign issue with people?
Well, I mean, Democrats certainly pushed it. I think healthcare, at least
this time around.
Democrats, No,
well,
they,
I mean,
2012 they did too.
The
Hillary
ACA was
sort of. I mean,
not good.
Hillary gave speeches, but Hillary's just a bad candidate.
Hillary
it wouldn't matter
said-
what it wouldn't matter what Hillary ran
Hillary
on,
said
frankly.
single payer will never ever happen.
But that's a separate argument than talking about protecting pre-existing conditions. They did it much more narrow this time.
You know, speaking of protecting pre-existing conditions, how can you talk about saving the patient protections for the people of America in a way that makes it sound like the least desirable or least inspiring thing you could imagine? Well, Nancy Pelosi cracked the code last night in her speech in announcing that the Democrats had taken over the House.
Today is more than about Democrats and Republicans. It's about restoring the Constitution's checks and balances to the Trump administration. It's about stopping the GOP and Mitch McConnell's assaults on Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, and the health care of 130 million Americans living with pre-existing medical conditions. Let's hear it more for pre-existing medical conditions.
Peak liberalism.
Where there's a will, there's a Pelosi. Oh my God!
I don't
that's
think
amazing.
she meant to say that.
I know.
Does anybody have gout out here?
Even in the
I want you to put your hands in the air.
It's not inspiring.
Well, look, I think it's inspiring to say that you're going to have health insurance that is not going to penalize you if you are pregnant or if you have cancer or if you're born with a congenital heart defect or if you have diabetes or if you have any one of the, the hundreds or thousands of ailments that used to keep people from getting health insurance and keep people out of bankruptcy. But she didn't articulate any of what I just said.
Fellow South Africans, who amongst you has gout, diabetes, or obesity?
If you don't have a pre-existing condition, though, what do you hear in that speech?
Well, we just played a
healthcare
clip
should
of it.
be free at point of service, and that's what they should be hammering on.
Yes, I understand. And we heard yesterday that about 50% of Democrats were out talking about Medicare for all. But the fact is that overwhelmingly, people want to retain their protections from the Affordable Care Act.
That sunk the GOP in Minnesota.
One of the few things that that sort of survived basically out of the last 8 years.
Lift your inhalers up.
And-
Say, oh.
But it's more of an example of her not being able to message it properly.
More of an example of just, it's so simple. They campaigned on taking away those protections. They said that you shouldn't have health care if
Right,
you
of
have
course.
obesity or a family crisis, and we beat them because we're going to protect you, blah, 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 blah. Not shout out pre-existing conditions. What?
It's weird. It's weird.
Holla at your girl. And incidentally, we're going to do absolutely nothing to raise
look,
your wages.
If you're not
Good
good,
night.
if you're not good at giving a speech, then don't give a speech.
I
you
actually am awesome.
But I mean, part of it was like she wanted to be able to go out there and make it seem like she was still in charge, and she is. But that's why she did that. But I just at one point, let's put the Democratic Party, let's put winning elections above the personal careers of these individuals.
And it's funny because it's very counter her brand, right? Because she's actually been kind of running around sort of saying, like, this isn't about me. I'm a veteran. Like, I'm just trying to kind of get the job done in a
But
way.
it clearly is. I mean,
Right, no,
unfortunately.
obviously, it's entirely about her. And even if, I actually think there's another thing Harry Reid was better at. Harry Reid was much more willing to be like, you know what? You guys get out there on TV. You're better than me.
Yes.
And I'm going to be in the back here, like, making the machine run, which she actually is arguably decent at.
Yeah,
But
I
she
think
completely undercuts by just being trash.
Yeah, I think so.
To me, that speech was very on brand because it was about defending the status quo and not asking for more. What do we want instead? But I think I've made my point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are problematic with it. I mean, you're not, I don't know if you see a House leader necessarily. I don't even think it's the role of a House leader in many respects to get out there and articulate those things, because they've got to provide cover for a whole range of candidates. And, whatever percentage it was that ran not on single payer health care or Medicare for all and won, she's got to provide protection for them. And it's not necessarily her role to do that. But, even if you're going to be timid, at least do it with some measure of competence.
I wasn't timid. That was
Timid competence
incompetent.
has not worked out well for the Democrats.
Show me the timid competence that the Democrats have exercised. That's exactly my point. They have not been competent
fair.
with their timidity either.
See, they're still like in my head that they're competent managers of this society. And
I think that's a projection.
You're
I think
buying
that's
into their brand, ironically.
Exactly.
And it's completely not true. They
Well,
suck.
they
All right,
project.
so
Check
the
this out.
Florida governor race now is 0.122% away from an automatic recount. DeSantis is at 49.7%. Gillum is at 49.1%. The margin is 50,000 votes. If it gets down to, I'm trying to do the math here, because right now it represents 0.621%. And essentially 0.1% votes, I guess it's around 8,000 votes. If he makes up 8,000 votes, it goes into an automatic recount.
I really wish he had not conceded. I mean, but you know what? It doesn't make any difference.
It doesn't matter,
yeah,
right?
Recount's recount.
Speaking of a misunderstanding of the dynamic of politics, here is, what's her name? Casey Hunt on MSNBC. And assuming that Donald Trump is going to, for some reason, play by the rules, she recounts the story where Nancy Pelosi was in the room with a bunch of Republican leaders and a Democratic leader and Donald Trump, and noticed that nobody was addressing her. And Casey seems to think that's going to change now.
I know it's tough. Very quickly, one thing that Donald Trump is going to have to change under this new reality is, remember Nancy Pelosi went to dinner at the White House and said, hey, do women get to talk around here? It was her and a bunch of men. Guess what? He's going to have to let her talk. Donald Trump is going to have to listen to a woman in power, and I think that is going to be a fascinating dynamic. Yep.
Yeah.
What's that?
Exactly.
I didn't start anything with the wife.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you are saying.
Right.
Why don't you relay the information to Mike? It's weird because he never wants to be around girls, but he communicates like them.
All right, we're going to have to end on a little bit on the early side today, folks, because I'm a bit fried. Calling from a 954 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, buddy, it's Michael from Miami.
Michael from Miami. So, is there going to be a recount?
Well, I mean, you guys Weigel was pretty good, and you guys were on it. Do you remember last time we talked, and I said I thought that Gillum was going to have to drag Nelson across the line?
Yep.
That was basically the theory. Yeah, well, the exact opposite happened. It looks like DeSantis dragged Scott across the line, which was really unheard of, but it came down to turnout. In Dade and Broward County, we got 56% turnout in Broward County. You got 60% over in Lee County, which is where Fort Myers is, a stronghold of Southwestern Republican, politicians. When you don't get your people out for whatever reason, and there was no excuse weather-wise or anything else, there were no voting irregularities. There just weren't a lot of people down here who apparently could get there for whatever reason. I mean, the one problem was in Dade County. They ran out of ink in one of the ballots for the early voting machines. But apart from that, dude, you had 5 million people early vote in this state, and that's a problem. And when you don't get your base out the way you really need to, especially in the bluest counties in the state, you're not going to win.
The only thing I would add to that, someone did call last night and say that the new Florida licenses were not.
I heard that. I heard you call. I did try to call. No, that's bullshit. I'm sorry. But with all due respect to my friend up there, no. I have a new Florida license. It took about 30 seconds for them to figure out how to reconstitute the iPad and get it set up. That was not an issue. No.
Okay.
Look, I would be the first one to tell you that I had hoped.
I'm not disbelieving you. I'm taking what you're saying at face value.
No, I know you're not. I'm just saying that was not the problem. There were a lot of people who were enthused. Look, Andrew did everything right. Okay, if you believe in his policies, and I know that on that panel over there's some who believe he wasn't progressive enough. Fair enough. That's a dispute for another day. But as far as running this campaign, Sammy, I've been following or covering Florida politics for a long time. He was the best Democratic candidate since Lawton Chiles for statewide office, and obviously the demographics in my state have changed remarkably since then. Okay, and you had starting in 1998 with Frank McBride, who has since passed away, and then in 2002 you had other people. Buddy Nevins back a long time ago. Then you had Frank McBride, and going on through. Then Charlie Crist is a Republican. Then Charlie Crist is a Democrat, and Alex Sink, and it's a cavalcade of losers. Andrew did not do that. He stuck to his message. He actually had one that was resonant. He had one that was timely because health care was clearly the number one issue in this state as well as the rest of the country. There were reasons that the health care issue should have been successful because Scott.
Did he back off? Let me ask you this: did he back off in the general off of like Medicare for all, or anyway? Did he change his position?
No. What he did was he kind of reformulated by saying, "Look, why shouldn't we be at the party? Why shouldn't we have a seat at the table trying to be able to get paid this Medicaid for expansion of Medicaid? It's ridiculous. It's being offered to us. Why are we saying no?" There's no reason to, except for petty political differences. So he didn't necessarily walk away from Medicare for all, but he more or less emphasized the fact that the Republicans had no plan. They still have no plan.
Right.
You understand? Ron DeSantis won because he tethered himself to Donald Trump. He had no new ideas. He spit out their talking points in an arguably, admirable fashion, depending if you think he was a computer or whether he was just being an automaton. And he basically stuck to his message. Okay, and that's how he won. He won because Donald Trump's popularity in my state is hovering somewhere between 45 to 47%, thereabouts.
Yep.
And the yahoos up north, they vote. They just vote. Those cultural issues, they work. And unfortunately, now you've got a situation where not only do we lose the governorship, and you want to know what the real disaster is? And this is what, I don't know if Weigel touched on this or not. I'm sorry I didn't hear it. The Florida Supreme Court has 3 mandatory openings. Which means that those justices, once they reach the age of 70, have to retire. Now, earlier this month, the Supreme Court decided that Scott did not have the right to go ahead and fill those vacancies. That would belong under the purview of the new governor. That was supposed to be, hopefully, Gillum. The fact that he can't do that means there's a whole raft of crap heading our way that the Florida Supreme Court is going to overturn like nobody's business, starting with workers' compensation laws, all kinds of environmental laws, everything else you can possibly imagine, not to mention the cavalcade of right-wing justices sitting in this district courts thanks that Trump filled Obama's slots, and those slots that Obama didn't fill during a recess appointment. It is beyond depressing in that regard.
Well,
so the fact that Andrew didn't win was bad. The fact that he ran, the FBI, there's going to be all kinds of recriminations. Did the FBI thing get to him? I don't think so. I don't think it was a question of people not believing this guy's trustworthy. I don't think that they thought he wasn't capable of running state government. This had to do with one thing and one thing only. Well, 2 things. 1, the color of his skin, and 2, the fact that Donald Trump has an unusual amount of popularity in this state.
All right,
That's all I can put.
I appreciate the call.
Take care, buddy.
I gotta
Hey,
jump.
by the way, congratulations and happy anniversary. I forgot to get back to you last
Thanks,
week. Well
man.
done. Very,
Appreciate it.
very proud of you and the guts it took to start this show. I'm giving you a sitting ovation, brother.
Thanks, I appreciate it. All right, folks. Well, listen, I got to go because I'm about to pass out. All right, we will be back tomorrow, folks. See you then.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the kicking, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out